Welcome, everyone. My name is Katie Vukashinovich, and I work in business development at Forest Contractors Limited, and we are proud to support this session, navigating TransformTO Net Zero and supporting programs to improve residential building performance, City of Toronto. It's my pleasure to introduce today's session. With over 25 years of experience, Forest Contractors Limited provides clients with top-quality asphalt, concrete, landscape, snow, and emergency site services. We are proudly CORE certified and awarded one of Canada's best managed companies. Check us out on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or on our website at forestgroup.ca. Now, before we start, I'd like to remind you to get comfortable and settle into your seat. Please use the chat function to connect with people in the session. The City of Toronto developed its climate action strategy, TransformTO, to reduce local greenhouse gas, GHG, emissions and improve our health, grow our economy, and improve social equity. With existing buildings accounting for 52% of GHG emissions in Toronto, our goal is to retrofit all of them by 2050 to achieve net zero emissions. The city recognized multi-unit residential buildings as an early priority through the Tower Renewal Program, as retrofitting these buildings helps preserve this aging housing stock while reducing GHG emissions. Today, you will learn about the upcoming TransformTO Net Zero strategy and what support programs are offered for residential buildings. Find out how participating in the Tower Renewal and Navigation Services Program can help you achieve the best outcome for your building and residents. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let's begin our session.
Good morning, and thank you for joining the City of Toronto seminar, Navigating TransformTO, Net Zero and Supporting Programs to Improve Residential Building Performance. My name is Teresa Todorova. I'm a Community Development Officer with the Tower Renewal team, and I will also be the moderator for today's presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Faria Hussain. I'm also on the Tower Renewal team at the City of Toronto, and I'm a speaker on the presentation today.
Hi, Duncan McClellan. I work in the Environment and Energy Division at the City of Toronto, project manager in the existing buildings team, and we work on low carbon buildings.
Hi, Lisa Cahill. I'm a water consultant with Toronto Water, and we work with the various ICI companies for water efficiency projects.
My name is Randy Dater, Vice President of Residential Properties at M&R Holdings, and I will be speaking on a few slides today as well.
Thank you, everyone. So let's begin. TransformTO is Toronto's ambitious climate action strategy. TransformTO will reduce local greenhouse gas emissions and improve our health, grow our economy, and improve social equity. Everyone will have a part to play in transforming Toronto into a low-carbon city. On October 2nd, 2019, Toronto City Council unanimously voted to declare a climate emergency and accelerate its efforts to mitigate and adapt to climate change. TransformTO will now aim to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 or sooner. This is the breakdown of greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto. 55% comes from homes and buildings, primarily from burning natural gas to heat indoor spaces and water. 36% are generated by transportation, with 80% of those emissions attributed to personal vehicles. And 9% are generated by waste, with food waste being the primary source. Out of all buildings emissions, over half comes from the residential sector. This is why the city has put in place a number of programs to support you and your residents as you work to improve your building's performance. I would like to highlight some of the long-term goals of TransformTO. 100% of all new buildings will be built to produce near zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. 100% of all existing buildings will have been retrofitted to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. In terms of transportation, 100% of vehicles in Toronto will use low carbon energy, and 75% of trips under 5 kilometers will be walked or cycled. According to the latest data release in 2018, Overall emissions have been reduced by 37% from 1990 levels, while Toronto's population continued to grow. We are ahead of schedule, but our next target is a 65% reduction by 2030. Achieving these targets will require transformational changes in how we live, work, commute, and build. TransformTO is one of the many strategies that the city uses to address climate change mitigation. The city has a number of other initiatives that contribute towards these goals, including the Resilience Strategy and Tower Renewal. I have Faria Hussain, a project manager with the Tower Renewal team, who will give us an overview of how her work helps existing buildings address the challenges of reducing greenhouse gases while improving quality of life for residents.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. As Teresa mentioned, Tower Renewal is one of the strategies that the city implements to address both climate change and improve housing quality of the affordable rental housing market in the city of Toronto. Tower Renewal works with the city's tower communities. So these are older apartment towers built before 1985, generally 8 or more stories. They're located across the city, and there are about 1,200 of them. These towers provide a lot of the de facto affordable housing in the city of Toronto. We tend to work with diverse partnerships, so residents, building staff, building owners, and local agencies to make change in these neighborhoods. And we've to date, worked with 400 buildings, retrofitted, provided financing to retrofit, $10 million worth of projects, and provided over $1 million in community investments in these neighborhoods. So we have a few different programs through the Tower Renewal Program. These include the STEP, walkthrough and holistic site assessment and benchmarking, the implementation of the residential apartment commercial zoning bylaw, which allows building owners to now have commercial uses on the main floor and ground floors of their buildings. And these are specifically apartment buildings. So things like dentist offices, community agencies, or even farmers markets. We also have the Green Champions Program, which is a resident engagement program for conservation awareness. I mentioned earlier financing. We provide retrofit financing with low interest from the city through the high-rise financing program. We also do a range of community initiatives, so everything from working with communities on developing community gardens to building murals, as all the way to bike workshops and bike mechanic training and food handler certificate training. The other thing we have is a new program called Taking Action on Tower Renewal, which I will talk about later on today. So this STEP is an acronym that the city uses, and one thing you should keep in mind, city loves to use lots of acronyms. So STEP stands for Sustainable Towers Engaging People. As I mentioned, STEP is a holistic in-person assessment of buildings where we look at, we assess the buildings using 200 questions that we ask the property manager or the superintendent. We also benchmark the building on energy, water, and waste, and then the questions cover energy, water, waste, operation, safety, and community. We use these 6 areas, the walkthrough, the 200 questions, as well as the benchmark to create a holistic recommendations report where we identify opportunities for improvement in the building, as well as opportunities and recognition for areas that a building owner is doing really well on or excelling in. Currently, the STEP offering is actually virtual because of COVID, COVID recommendations. But, once we're, prior to COVID, we would do a 2-hour walkthrough of the building. The key here is usually we work with buildings, as I said, built before 1985 with 8 or more stories. The parameters are flexible though. A lot of buildings, built before 1990, 6, 7 stories still meet that idea of providing affordable rental housing for Torontonians. So we're really trying to support those owners and property managers. To date, we've worked with almost 400 residential buildings, and we benchmarked, have a data set of about 400 residential buildings as well. So what are the key things that STEP can provide for you? One, as a building owner, it helps you understand your baseline in those 6 areas. So where are you starting from in terms of your energy, water, and waste consumption, as well as your operation, safety, and community initiatives? The second thing it does, as I mentioned, it identifies opportunities to improve, as well as recognizes areas that you're excelling in. So what are some things we could leverage or support you with, or some new and interesting ideas we could work with you on to improve your building in those 6 areas? The last thing it does is actually helps you assess over time. So we actually re-benchmark buildings and re-step buildings every 5 to 3 years. And that way we can say, okay, you did some improvements. How does that work from an energy efficiency perspective? Did your energy consumption go down? And we can show you the impact over time that you're having on your buildings. One of the key things we like to do is streamline, conservation measures and utility incentives. So we work closely with our partners at Enbridge, as well as IESO, to help you get, the biggest bang for your buck for all of your retrofits, and make sure we identify opportunities and you don't miss any incentive opportunities. Prior to COVID, we would actually bring Enbridge or IESO conservation demand management staff onto walkthroughs with us, so that you would get a STEP action report, an Enbridge report, and an IESO, or in the past Toronto Hydro report, all at once. So we're really here to help you streamline that process. The third thing we do is also identify opportunities for community engagement. So how can we work with you and your residents to bring community supports, bring community initiatives, like I mentioned, the community garden, murals, and other community consultation opportunities to your doorstep, and get your residents engaged in retrofits, engaged in their community, and create some level of social interaction between the different towers and between neighbors in these tower buildings. So we tend to leverage, local community agencies, city units, and other services. And, we want to work with the building owners as well as the residents to understand what's needed. This is an example of a STEP benchmark. So this is energy. So on energy, we measure both electricity consumption and natural gas consumption. Natural gas we convert into kilowatt hours, so we can get both on the same graph. And so here you can see a high performance, a mid performance, and a low performance zone. And we have 2 buildings here, 265 and 275 Cassandra. So they were first benchmarked in 2013, and you can see at that point they were in the low performance zone. 5 years later, in 2018, we re-benchmarked them, and they were now in the mid-performance zone, both reducing consumption in the range of 20 to 30%. That's a huge difference, and the retrofits, as well as the opportunities and the tenant engagement that the building owners have done, partially in partnership with us, and through things that we were able to help them assess the impact of through the benchmark. So this is a good way to, one, assess your building's improvement over time, but also assess your portfolio. Can you compare different buildings that are in your portfolio against each other over time? And so the benchmark on energy, water, and waste will look very similar to this, and you can compare your portfolio in all 3 of those. So what are some of the things that building owners have done? Well, they've done a range of improvements, as you can see on this very packed slide. So in terms of electricity conservation, building owners have done things like elevator motor modernization and replacement. And so what happens here is we're actually able to finance that, because you can get a variable motor, which reduces your energy consumption. And so that's something the high-rise financing program can finance, but also it increases the resiliency of the building. Other things we've worked on with building owners are, we're financing roofs with enhanced insulation, as well as high efficiency windows, so double glazed windows. We finance those, and building owners have implemented that with great results. One of the other things we finance are, building automation systems upgrades, as well as boiler upgrades. And those are things, again, we've seen some really good results, and we can show the pre and post retrofit impacts through the benchmark. Building owners have also done some great in-suite measures, which help also residents see the further bonus and impact of these retrofits. In safety, community, and operations, we've also seen building owners take on quite a bit of improvement as well. So in safety, one of the things that was key is, building owners have trained some staff in conflict resolution and mental health. And during COVID, we've all realized the impacts of this differently. And so this is something we could leverage and work with building owners on to continue this training with their staff. Operations training is something we've worked with buildings on, as well as conservation awareness training, which we've done for free for building staff. Communities, we've worked, if you can see the pictures on the slide, that's actually a basketball court refresh that we did in Mornell Court with the surrounding buildings and the youth there. And the youth actually picked the picture as well as painted the picture in a paint by number scenario. So we're happy to leverage these opportunities and work with building owners to identify how we can, improve the community safety and operations aspects of their building. I've mentioned a few times the financing program that we run. So we provide low interest financing for energy efficiency retrofits in residential apartment buildings with 3 or more stories across Toronto. There's no age or vintage. Any residential apartment building qualifies, and these terms are up to 20 years. We've committed about $10 million in financing to date at 16 projects with over 2,300 units. We've reduced greenhouse gas emissions on average by 20% at each project, and 90% of the participants, when surveyed, said that they would have delayed their retrofit or not completed it at all without this financing. So we're really here to support building owners to move projects forward. And these projects have both beneficial impacts on their climate footprint, their residents' quality of life, as well as maintaining this affordable housing stock into the future. And that's what we're here to do. So from there, I think I should pass it back to Teresa.
Thank you, Faria. This was a great overview of the Tower Renewal Programs and their impact. I have Randy here, who is the Vice President of Residential Properties with M&R Holdings. And Randy has seen firsthand the benefits for property owners of participating in STEP and high-rise. So Randy, can you share some more information about the projects that you've undertaken in your buildings and some of the outcomes?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Teresa. So we actually enrolled a total of 14 buildings in the STEP and high-risk programs. The programs helped us identify opportunities to get closer to a net zero carbon footprint while improving the overall operating efficiencies of our buildings. Apart from creating a business case from a financial quantitative perspective, there were also environmental and other qualitative benefits. So just to give you an example, some of the projects we enrolled in the high-risk program, we installed new windows and balcony doors, 3 buildings. We employed our engagement model and a number of strategies to get tenant buy-in. We got 100% financing from the City of Toronto's Tower Renewal Program. It was a 3-year pilot program when it was first launched, and I was pleased that we were the first out of the gate, the first landlord to qualify for the special financing program. There was a range of financing terms anywhere between 5 and 20 years. We opted for the 15-year term. It was much easier than traditional financing. The financing is tacked onto our property tax bill. There were no environmental phase 1 or phase 2 audits required, no appraisals required, no legal fees required. It was much quicker and easier from an administrative perspective to get the financing in place. We enrolled 3 buildings. There was a 2-suite, 498-suite building at Yonge and Sheppard, and at 6061 Yonge Street, which is Yonge south of Steeles, there was a 304-suite building, which you see on the screen here, where we invested $1.3 million. 6061 Yonge Street is a 20-story building, over 304 suites, built in 1970. We actually saved $85,000 a year in gas costs, which represented 26.8% savings. We saved $15,000 a year in plaster repairs by installing the new windows. We saved $20,000 a year in window repairs. So we actually found, by replacing these old windows in the building, we saved $120,000 a year in operating costs. Plus, we were able to yield another $20 a month on turnover at a 23% turnover rate for new suites because we had much nicer windows in the building. Nicer elevation, certainly much nicer on the inside of the suite. So this gave us an additional $16,800 a year in revenue. So our net NOI actually increased after we installed these new windows through the high-ris City of Toronto financing program by $136,800. imagine we had a 6-figure increase in our NOI. So from a cash flow perspective, this was the best part. We were positive from a cash flow perspective at the end of year one. We spent, our NOI went up by $136,800. Our debt service on the $1.3 million was $117,400 a year. So we were actually positive on a net cash flow basis by installing these brand new windows in our building and thermally insulated balcony doors on a 20-story building over 304 suites to the tune of $19,400, almost $20,000 a year on a net cash flow basis. We were in the black. So those were the financial benefits, but in terms of the financial fundamentals, it was extraordinary. We increased the value of the building by over double at a 5% cap rate based on the NOI increase. The value of our building increased by $2.7 million on a $1.3 million investment. We had a simple payback in under 10 years, and 9.5 years to be exact, and we realized a double-digit return on our investment at 10.5%. There were also environmental benefits. We saved 226,826 cubic meters of gasoline per year. Natural gas. Imagine saving 226,826 cubic meters of natural gas a year. This resulted in greenhouse gas reduction of 429 metric tons of CO2 saved a year. If we wanted to convert this to the equivalent of the greenhouse gas emission savings, it's like taking 30 passenger cars off the road a year, diverting 154 tons of waste from landfill a year, and supplying electricity for 39 homes a year. It's pretty significant on a 304 suite, 20-story building. We also had qualitative benefits. For example, increased tenant comfort. There was less ambient noise coming from the street on Yonge Street, and no more air infiltration drafts. We had improved marketing efforts in terms of tenant referrals. The tenants were happier. We were able to feature the new windows in our advertising medium, and we had enhanced aesthetics, as mentioned earlier, from a building elevation perspective in terms of the interior aesthetics, and of course we had a reduction of those pesky electric portable heaters that 40% of our tenants were using to augment the heat as a result of the old original windows in the building.
Thank you, Randy. And you've also done some building envelope improvements in other buildings. So what value is insulated overcladding adding to retrofits for you?
Well, we did. We installed an overcladding system at 2 buildings. One community we have located at Broadview and Danforth, representing nearly 600 suites. We installed an EIFS overcladding system, which included 3 inches of rigid insulation and about 7 layers and a stucco finish, which created a lot of thermal value to the building, to the suites. And we did this at the same time as installing brand new low-E argon gas filled windows and insulated balcony doors on almost 600 suites in the same building. So this resulted in about 34% a 34% savings of gas used for winter space heating. We had less drafts, better tenant comfort, and a reduction, of course, in ambient street noise. These older buildings they have a lot of issues, such as degradation of the exterior building surface. You get, for example, flaking and spalling of the brickwork. You get water infiltration, and you get corrosion of your shelf angles, which is a real ongoing concern and problem. This deterioration leads to costly continuous maintenance and ultimately to expensive methods to replacing exterior brickwork. There have been many high-rise buildings that have been built during the same period, and they installed single glazed windows. And so quite frankly, these windows can lead to a lot of tenant discomfort in the winter. And there's a lot of exposure in terms of a radiant cold surface being created on the windows, and that leads to condensation on the window panes and condensation on the seals, and it leads to all kinds of further water damage around the windows and the frames. So this insulated overcladding system that we installed, coupled with the double glazed windows, resulted in a wonderful improvement for all the reasons mentioned, and quite frankly, they should be done in tandem. And we did this at both buildings, and we had tremendous success.
Thank you, Randy. So these projects, they're dependent on many factors to be successful. So what are some of the key lessons that you can share from your experience?
Well, with any building improvement or change in operations, it's important to really engage both your staff and your tenants in the project, and especially when it comes to waste diversion. We did a case study with the City of Toronto at two properties we have, 265 and 275 Cassandra Boulevard. They're each 12-story buildings with about 164 suites each. And we found, we did a case study by engaging our tenants in our recycling efforts. We were able to lower our solid waste by 11% in the first year. And quite frankly, our diversion rates went from the bottom quartile of 130 buildings measured and tracked to the top quartile in a matter of a year. And we did this through a three-pronged approach. We created convenience, we educated our tenants, and through enforcement. So some of the strategies we employed from a convenience perspective was we actually recruited students, high school students who needed volunteer hours, and they went around and helped the seniors take their organics and the recyclables down to the respective containers. We lowered access to the recycle bins for seniors and shorter tenants because they had trouble reaching over the bins, so we retrofitted our bins to make it much easier for them. We renovated the shoot rooms on every floor, increasing the lighting, making them cleaner and brighter, and making it more pleasant for people to be in. We created info kiosks at tenant barbecues through an outreach program, and we communicated our diversion rates and our progress through our tenant newsletters and email blasts. We enhanced lighting in the exterior garbage areas to make people feel safer to go out there at night. And we installed canopies over walkways leading to these recyclable areas that we created at our sites. We created recycle rooms in parking garages that never existed before. We would take over 2 parking spots and punch a hole out, let's say in the B1 level, and create a recycling depot next to a laundry room or on the way to people taking their garbage out, the recyclables out to their cars. So it's all about convenience. We put in sliding doors to garbage enclosures as opposed to swing doors, which made it much easier for access for both our staff and our tenants. And we created cutouts in these garbage enclosures for these bins at a low level with great signage for our tenants, making it much easier for them to access. So that's what we did from a convenience perspective. From an education perspective, we had all kinds of directional signage. We had designated signage for the respective organics and recyclables and solid waste. We reinforced this through our newsletters and our welcome packages. We even had an onboarding training program on our recyclable program when we were onboarding new tenants. And from an enforcement perspective, we put video cameras at all of our garbage areas. We had the $5,000 bylaw reference to no dumping from the City of Toronto that we posted at our bins. We made sure we locked our compactor bins and our recyclable bins so that people had to use the designated access points to prevent contamination and illegal dumping. And from we did all kinds of things. We even increased the compression rates on our compactors to make them more efficient and carry more capacity from an enforcement perspective. So, it's really been proven that you can actually achieve an additional 5 to 15% increase in your energy savings by engaging your residents and your staff in your energy conservation initiatives. And we've done this in all kinds of ways. Now, there are some challenges when it comes to tenant engagement. Tenant buy-in is always a challenge. You're getting your tenants to buy into what you're doing. Communication is always a challenge. We've used things like newsletters and posters and tenant events and letters, email blasts. We've set up kiosks at tenant barbecues. We've done mock-ups for window retrofits. We have a tenant portal that we've created from a communication perspective. Other challenges include tenant participation. You've really got to make an effort to communicate effectively with your tenants. And then, of course, ongoing cooperation, having a level of participation from your tenants to ensure your initiative is successful. So we've employed at M&R an engagement model, which consists of 3 key components to facilitate engagement with our tenants, engaging them in our energy efficient initiatives. The first one is to share our vision. So we share our vision with our tenants. We have mock-ups that we've done of our window retrofits. We do mock-up of 3-liter toilets. We share our vision, our pre and post diversion rates with our tenants prior to implementing new programs. We do this through newsletters and posters and special events and letters and kiosks and mock-ups. We listen to our tenants with respect to schedule. We did a balcony retrofit and a window retrofit at the same time, and we were going to do the balconies in the summer and start the windows in the fall. And based on feedback we got from our tenants, we listened to them. They didn't want us doing our balconies in the summertime when they wanted access to their balconies. So we flip-flopped it. We did our windows in the summer, and we did the balconies in the fall. So listening to your tenants goes a long way in getting buy-in and engagement. And lastly, we partner with our tenants through organizations strategically like the Tenants Association. So just to summarize, there are some tips to encourage tenant engagement. You need to engage and educate your employees before your tenants, and this creates a sense of building pride and ownership. You need to explain the benefits of the project before it begins, and this builds a sense of excitement amongst your staff and your tenants. We use multiple communication tools with consistency, again through email blasts and online texts and tenant newsletters. And then lastly, you want to measure the results and repeat your engagement model by constantly sharing your vision, constantly listening to your tenants, and constantly trying to facilitate their participation and buy-in.
Thank you, Randy. That was really informative, and I think you've provided some really key points for everyone. I'll now bring in Faria and ask you a follow-up question. So, we heard from Randy about the importance of including residents and staff in the retrofit process. But if you are just starting out or you have a project in mind, you don't know how to tackle this, what are some programs available through the city to engage with residents and educate on conservation?
Thank you, Teresa. That's a great question. I was just about to say that is an impressive list from Randy. So I think that's, and these are things that we're trying to build on and support further. So if you don't know where to start, as Teresa asked, we have, Tower Renewal has the Green Champions program. So I mentioned this earlier. It's a resident engagement program on conservation awareness where we use a train the trainer model. So we provide 4 workshops to Green Champions at, at a few buildings. So we'll take an area of the city where there are 3 or 4 neighboring buildings, and we'll select 3 to 5 Green Champions per building. We'll work with the local agency to actually deliver the program so that there's familiarity in the area. And really, there are 2 purposes to this program. One is to learn how to reduce your there's 3 purposes, I should say. One is to reduce your personal ecological footprint. The second is to get at that, as Randy said, 5 to 15% potential energy, water, waste savings that you could get at by implementing behavioral change. And the third is social cohesion, right? It's a good opportunity to get social interactions going between your peers and neighbors in your buildings and between buildings. And so as I was saying, we do 4 workshops, one on energy, one on waste, one on water, and then a last one on sustainability. So how do the Green Champions continue to exist and continue their activities throughout the year? The Green Champions as a group need to create 2 resident engagement activities per workshop. And that's to engage, again, as I said, their peers and neighbors in conservation awareness tips and tricks and how to implement these behavioral changes. So far, we've done 14 buildings at 3 different sites, and we have at least 30 Green Champions, and they've engaged, over 1,000 residents, at the bottom end. But these Green Champions, we're really proud to say they've done at least 16 events with their peers and neighbors, and these include things like booths and even having like a lobby intercept and being at, local festivals. So, at San Hermano Way, we had Green Champions at the Taste of Jane and Finch talking to the entire community beyond their buildings about conservation awareness. So it's a really big opportunity that we want to work with building owners on. The other programs that the city has is the 3 R's Ambassadors program from our solid waste division at the City of Toronto, where they promote the 3 R's of recycling. So these are resident volunteers that promote the ideas of reduce, reuse, and recycle, and they work with buildings that are on city pickup, so City of Toronto pickup, to implement these types of activities and engage residents. And this is something that 3 R Ambassadors should work with their building staff to, and we can again create that connection to our solid waste partners. The other program we have is Live Green Toronto. So Live Green Toronto is a program that delivers grants, incentives, resources, as well as volunteering opportunities for Toronto residents to engage in, strategies to reduce our climate, our climate footprint, or to address climate change and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And so we connect our green campaigns to the Live Green volunteer opportunities. They can represent the city at different events across Toronto again, on different tips and opportunities to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So those are sort of the three major areas.
Thank you. That sounds really great. And we know that these types of engagements have a huge impact on the environment, but also on operational costs for buildings as well. So you mentioned you have a new program coming up. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, we're very excited. Thank you, Teresa, for that question. I was looking forward to getting to this one. We have a new program called the Taking Action on Tower Renewal that we're hoping to launch this summer. We've received, $11.7 million in low interest financing, as well as $1.8 million in grants to encourage deep retrofits in areas of the city that have low socioeconomic indicators. So what we have on the slide here is a map of the city of Toronto. All of the black dots are those 1,200 pre-1985, 8 stories and higher buildings. And I think it's a little light, but there's some yellow outlining. Those are neighborhood improvement areas. So there are 31 of those, and out of the 140 neighborhoods in the city of Toronto, and those neighborhoods have scored lower in comparison to the rest of the neighborhoods on socioeconomic indicators. And then the other thing I'll mention is the green in this map. The green shows areas of the city that are low in consensus tracts. So where a higher proportion of people live in those neighborhoods, score lower on the low income after taxes measure. And so what we're hoping to do is target this financing grants into these neighborhoods, neighborhood improvement areas, low in consensus tracts, so that we can really get at those buildings where, they might not have enough funding to do these deeper retrofits that, Randy, our colleague, spoke of earlier, right, in terms of eaves over cladding, high efficiency windows. And there's an opportunity there to also engage residents and make it a holistic retrofit. And so we're really excited. We will be back talking about this at some point, and I really appreciate the question, Teresa. Can't wait to get started on this summer. So come back for more info.
Thank you, Faria. At this point, I'll bring back Duncan into the presentation. The city has an ambitious goal when it comes to TransformTO. And as we saw earlier, buildings contribute approximately 55% of Toronto's greenhouse gas emissions. And what happens if your building doesn't fall within, the existing buildings or the Tower Renewal Program? What case about that?
Well, thanks for asking, Teresa, and this has been great so far. We're here in the Environment and Energy Division. We have a multitude of different types of programs for people who don't necessarily fit into the boxes or the programs that have already been talked about. Here at the Better Building Partnership, we strive to create these support programs to get buildings to lower carbon and to help them get there when they don't have the internal support as well. To date, we've listed here some of the successes that we've had in a while in the last few years since 1996 when the BBP was formed. And for the way that we structured our program is we structured them into 3 kind of categories. This didn't line up very well, actually, but the first category is support. So as you see in there, the STEP program is in that, but we've also got navigation, better homes, renewable energy, and the Green Will Initiative. In the middle column is our financing piece, and you've already heard about the high-rise program, but we also have some different ones, help and energy retrofit loans. And then at the end there, we've got policy and enablement, and what we really strive for there is to it's kind of, I guess, the stick at the end after all the carrots that we try and provide. So our biggest program that I think is probably the most helpful for most buildings in the city is the navigation and support services. And what we aim to do here is take buildings through the whole process of taking a look at your building and figuring out how you can get to lower carbon. It's really a hand-holding kind of concierge type program where if you don't know where you're going or you don't know what to do, here's where you start. Here are some of the steps that you can take to take a look at your building. Do you need an audit? Do you need to benchmark your building? Where do you start? What do you do? If you know where that is already and you're kind of halfway through the journey, or you need some help with something, we can still help you with that, as we can review certain things that you've done. We can help give guidance on the next step, or on you know, different types of funding options, whether it be through the federal, provincial, municipal government, or your utilities. We can really help lead you through, and we can get all that information if you fill out a form on the BBP website below. Next, I go through this quickly. This is just our residential portal. Better Homes TO has everything that we do with retrofitting of residential houses. Not going to lean a lot on that because I think that's more on the residential side. But if you have any residential homes that you're working with, everything is on this portal here. It's kind of a one-stop shop. Renewable energy. So our team has a renewable energy group that does no-cost consultations, and the main one that they deal with is solar, but they also can take a look at the geothermal, geo-exchange, and energy storage capacity for your building on the commercial side. On the residential side, they also do assessments and visual layouts for solar. But if you check out the SolarTO website or email solarto@toronto.ca, just all you would need is your address and an energy bill, electricity bill, and they can get you started on that. The Green Will Initiative is a fairly new project that we have taken on. In late 2019, the mayor came to us and asked us if we could start a program for large building portfolios, and we've really leaned on a couple of different pillars. We wanted to recognize the buildings that are doing really good work within the space and promote what they are doing. We wanted those people to help build pathways to net zero for existing buildings, for retrofits, and then also to collaborate on how they can go further. How can we build that pathway so we have different archetypes for people to go in and do themselves. This is another big program that I believe would be very beneficial to building owners and also to contractors who are looking to do some of this work. Our energy retrofit loans. What we really aim to do is remove financing as a barrier for a lot of these programs. So what the city has taken on is they have taken on the task of having a pass-through financing program where buildings within the city can fund energy projects at the cost of borrowing of the city, up to 20 years. So the length of the loan is determined by the payback period of the project. For example, if you have a 12-year payback period on a boiler replacement to a high efficiency boiler, then the length of the term would be 12 years. The big key part is up to the first year is interest-free and payment-free. That is determined by the length of construction period. So eligibility, all City of Toronto buildings, any building in the City of Toronto can apply for this, and we'd start the process and begin figuring out the case. Application process, you do expression of interest. The big key part is you need to have some audited financial statements. And then after that, there's a funding agreement and a disbursement. Here's some sample projects at the bottom. Window envelopes, so the things that Randy was talking about earlier, chiller, boiler, BAS replacement, and you can even use it for solar and energy storage.
Thank you, Duncan. So there is a lot of support in terms of program and financing that's coming through the city. But what are some of the policies that the city is putting in place to ensure that we meet our TransformTO targets?
That is one of the key parts. So to hit our targets, we know that it's not going to be an easy task, and part of that will be that we have to put some sort of policy in place for emissions for existing buildings. It's much easier to build a new building to low emissions than it is to retrofit an existing one. So right now, the city is developing the framework for their existing buildings emission strategy. That should be due out Q2 of this year and go to council. At that point, it will go public and it can be accessed. But what we're looking to do is to have some archetypes and limits to the amount of emissions that existing buildings can be on. So the whole key is to achieve those deep energy reductions in the building sector, and within the city that isn't totally our only goal, because we do have to weigh some of the other pieces and the other co-benefits that can happen. So social equity, the economic impact, resiliency, health. So a lot of the different things that Teresa and Faria and Randy were talking about earlier as well. These are really some of the key areas that we're looking at for the framework. These are a lot of the pieces that we found in our industry scan and our jurisdictional scan. So New York, for example, has a pretty robust program. BC has their StepH program that feature a lot of these different elements. But these are really the key elements that we've been looking on. Everything from expanding our financing options, which we just talked about with energy retrofits loans, public disclosure, performance targets, and then ratcheting those down over time. So all of these are being looked at, and they will all be in consideration in the framework, and then there will be implementation pieces after that. So as I said, the next step is it will be presented to City Council in Q2, and then the implementation stage is the next stage, which will be pretty interesting to see how we're able to implement that and roll it out.
Thank you, Duncan. That is some really exciting work, and we're all looking forward to seeing how it develops over the next few months. So at this point, I'll just bring in Lisa. As we've heard a lot about reducing your building's energy consumption, but the city is also a big advocate for the conservation of all natural resources. So Lisa, you're a Toronto water consultant, and you will be able to give us some overview of the benefits for water efficiency for people's buildings, businesses, but also the environment as well. So take it away.
All right, yes. So I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the benefits of water efficiency. So for businesses, some of the biggest savings with reducing your water bill, you achieve cost savings overall. You get lower variable costs. It reduces your risk from fluctuating prices. You can delay spending on infrastructure upgrades. And then it also provides a competitive advantage by reducing your operating costs and the associated energy and gas savings that come from that. But also it lets you meet requirements for maybe LEED or BOMA certifications that you're going for, and it can extend the lifespan of some of your operating equipment. So I want to talk to you about a few programs that Toronto Water has. The first one is the Capacity Buyback Program, and it's for commercial and institutional sites only. And what it is a water efficiency audit where a professional engineer will come in. They will go through your site and do usually 2 to 4 hour inspection, and they look for possible water savings and also where you're currently consuming your water. From that visit, they'll provide you with a report that you get at the end of this that has a water balance for the facility, along with benchmarks against similar facilities, and then recommendations for projects that you can or cannot complete. It's entirely up to you. There's no obligation to complete any of the projects that come from this report, but it gives you a good understanding of where your water is currently being consumed and opportunities to reduce that. it shows you the estimated cost, the return on investment, and potential rebates for doing specific projects. So part of the program does include rebates for very specific projects. That includes things like boiler or chiller upgrades, food processing changes, or certain site-specific changes like gray water reuse and rainwater harvesting, or refrigeration is another big one that it also covers. So what it gives you is a 30-cent per liter of water reduced per day. So let's say you change out all your water-cooled refrigeration units and it saves you 10,000 liters of water a day. That's going to give you a $3,000 rebate. This is 30 cents per liter. But then that'll also result in water bill savings of over $14,000 every year going forward. So these audits can really help you get a better understanding of where you can make sometimes easy or sometimes very large changes to your building. So the next program is the Sewer Surcharge Rebate Program. And this is for all industrial, commercial, and institutional buildings in the city. And this is for rebate for money for water that does not go into the sewer. So it's being used in products or evaporated by cooling towers. This rebate is 57% of the water bill, because that is the amount that goes to paying for the sewer treatment in the city. So in this example here, so a business uses 100,000 cubic meters of water a year, and they're diverting 20% of that into a product that they're making. So they would be eligible for a rebate of $46,438 every year for that. You have to submit an application every year outlining where your water use is going, but as soon as you submit that, it makes you eligible to receive this rebate. The last program that we have is the Industrial Water Rate Program. This is for industrial sites only. And what it is a discounted water rate for all water use beyond 5,000 cubic meters per year. And it is applied in perpetuity for a site as long as it's being used for industrial reasons. And so you have to submit a water conservation plan that outlines all the possible projects on your site that could reduce water consumption. And any of them with a payback period of 5 years or less must be committed to being completed, and then you become eligible to receive this reduced water rate. This can dramatically reduce water bills for industrial sites. And as long as you complete those projects, you'll be able to stay on the reduced rate going forward. And then something else I wanted to talk about that a lot of places are not yet aware of, it's called My Water Toronto. So My Water Toronto is an online tool that lets you track your water use. It lets you visually see as well as download all of the data of the water use at your site. So this is an example of one of the charts that you'd be able to get. So this shows daily water use at this facility. And then it also shows the outside temperature and the precipitation. So it can let you correlate to see if there's certain, especially if you, for your cooling systems, it can let you see if you're experiencing water spikes. And then this can all be exported very easily onto an Excel document, and then you can analyze it yourself or attach it to other information for your site and use it in your own in-house analysis. So those are all the programs that I wanted to talk with you about. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at savewater@toronto.ca. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, Duncan, Randy, and Faria for providing an overview of how we can all take action to achieve TransformTO's goals. Thank you to everyone who joined our seminar, and we look forward to connecting with you and answering your questions.